If you're not into gaming, this might not be the video for you, but this is something I've been thinking about for a long time now. So I played The Last of Us 2, and as you can imagine, I was pretty disappointed. Originally, my idea was that I would restructure all of the flashback pieces in a good order so that the rising tension of the game would be better, because one of the biggest technical flaws narratively is that in the middle of the story, the rising tension is at a high point, and then it comes to a complete stop once you start playing as Abby. While I was playing the game, I was really asking myself some interesting questions. I haven't really seen these questions addressed in any other videos. They don't really have anything to do with the story in The Last of Us per se. There are more questions about the narrative overall and about the development of this game and the decisions that they made. I am by no means a business expert. I had to retake the economics exam multiple times when I was in university, so I am not at all a qualified person to talk about which strategic moves would commercially make sense. But I just figured that I would give my 2 cents, bring up the questions that I asked myself. So the first one is that I really don't understand why this franchise has not used their license in a better way. You have one super well-beloved game. The first one was a big hit. We got the Last of Us Left Behind DLC, which I also played and I absolutely adored. I was wondering why they didn't just make more DLCs like that, because that DLC, Left Behind, gave us more insight into the history of Ellie's bite and how she became what she is now. We got introduced to Ellie's sexuality, and we also were introduced to a new character. I forgot her name, but she was a super nice character. Well, what if they, instead of, pushing and cramming all of this content in this one game, letting fans wait for 7 years with the risk of disappointing a lot of them, why didn't they just make multiple DLC type games, or maybe just shorter games in general of, let's say, 10 hours. And then in these DLCs, the story of Abby, Yara, and Lev could be explored a little bit more so that we could get to know these characters. We could have little teasers to Ellie and Joel's story so that you wouldn't be completely abandoning the main storyline. But at least that's what I would have liked. Anything that has The Last of Us name stamped on it, I would buy and I would play. Maybe a DLC surrounding Abby as the main character leading up to the events in the hospital when Joel saved Ellie would have been pretty cool, because then you would have had those flashbacks of her father saving people. Who were those people, or how did the Fireflies function, or something like that? Because Abby was part of the Fireflies, so that might have given us more insight into the Fireflies as a faction. Maybe here and there a little flash of Ellie and Joel and seeing the story in parallel, and it might have made us question Joel's actions even more. Also, they could have made some teasers already in the new DLCs surrounding the wolves and the Seraphites. Because the wolves and the Seraphites are pretty interesting, but I don't feel like they really do a lot in the game itself, in The Last of Us 2. The settlement that Abby is a part of is so amazing, and I wish we would have gotten the chance to hang out more in that place, to see more of the place, because you literally just have to follow the other characters somewhere, then you play with a dog, and then you're gone, basically. The same goes for Jackson. It's insane how beautiful it looks, but you don't get to experience any of it. Now, I know that the style of this franchise is not to give you open world things, but because they included an open world type part in the second game, if you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. I wish they would have done that, but in Jacksonville. If they would have just made a small spin-off game where you are Ellie and you're a teenager or something, and you get to know Dina and all of these other children, and you kind of see that Ellie has a little bit of troubles blending in. She is still keeping the secret that she's immune. So that could have been a cool dynamic, because then we, as the consumers, as the gamers, could have been introduced to characters like Jesse and Dina and all of these other ones that I'm forgetting and are not interesting at all. That could have been pretty cool. Also, if you would put the Seraphites and the wolves or something, but especially the Seraphites in one of the DLCs. Imagine you've played a DLC with the Seraphites and they have this whistling language, and then in the main game you hear that whistle. That would have been pretty cool. There was no real dramatic connection between me and the Seraphites, at least not in the beginning, They were pretty cool, but they were basically just people in long coats and axes. So I wish I had known about the Seraphites and their story before I killed them all as Ellie, maybe. So the second question that I was asking myself while I was playing the game is, why didn't they innovate more in terms of game mechanics? I had played the exact same gameplay multiple times because I replayed the first game multiple times, and although the gunplay is still passable, I don't feel like it has improved a lot. I just wish that there were some other cool things that you could craft, because in the game you see that other factions are using all of these cool traps. You as Ellie could have used the rope more often, or if you could have strung up people in a trap, or even, you know, put tripwires, have a grappling hook, all that good stuff, because you don't really get that option. It's basically all the same. And that comes back to my point about DLCs, because if you have smaller installments or DLCs, at least in my opinion, I'm not sure if it's logical, don't come at me if it's not. If you have some more smaller installments, smaller DLCs, you can kind of try some stuff out and see what people like the most and build on your game, because I feel like with The Last of Us 2 there was so much pressure on the team. I can imagine that it must have been so stressful to make this game, but you would have had the chance to try and develop the gameplay further, because I'm not sure what happened exactly, but I don't feel like the gameplay is improved much. The third question I have, and this is something very particular that I was thinking about, and I first want to talk about The Incredibles for a minute. The first Incredibles came out quite a while ago. The Incredibles 2 movie came out like a decade or more later. With The Last of Us, it has been 7 years, which is also pretty long. I was honestly very pleasantly surprised when I went to see the movie and saw that they picked up exactly where they left off. I've seen some people online talk about that narratively it would have been even more interesting had they aged up the children a little bit. I see where that's coming from, but I have to disagree, and I'm gonna wait to make the big point of this video until after, because this is actually related to that. But so that's why I asked the question, why was it necessary to age up Ellie that much? They even show the last scene of the first game again. The game pretty much ends with Ellie and Joel talking. Ellie asks Joel if everything he said about the Fireflies was true. Did they have more people that they could operate on? She wasn't the only one that was immune to the infection and so on, so that she could be saved and she didn't have to feel guilty. And Joel just lies between his teeth. I'm not sure if they were hinting at that she already knows that he's lying or that she will find out later. I just think that after 7 years of a gap between these two games, they could have just picked up right from there. And I mean exactly that scene. Basically, the subplot that I'm most interested in has always been and will always be Joel and Ellie's. The trust between them is broken because Ellie finds out that he lied. And that is a damn interesting plot if you think about it. I was always playing the game, and every time a scene with Joel and Ellie came on, I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna get to know more, like, how did she find out? That was the one question that I was always asking. How did she find out? How did their relationship go sour? If they would have just started with Ellie at that exact age, at that exact time, we could have had a very interesting story that drove our two characters apart. Now, I'm not saying that this had to be like the complete focus of the second game. Maybe it could have been the first half of the game with Joel dying in the middle, which would have been an awesome midpoint to the story. It would have. Even better would have been had Joel died at the end of the game, and then in the third installment we would have had this revenge story, only better set up. I was always very excited to know more about them and about how that came to pass, and I wasn't really interested in anything else. In the first game, you play as Joel for 80% of the time and maybe 20 or even 15% as Ellie. And the second installment of the franchise could have been the other way around. Because I was so disappointed when you only played as Joel for 4 minutes in this game? And that is just unacceptable. You've waited for 7 years to play this amazing character again that you've grown to love. I don't mind Joel dying in this game. I just wish that he would have died later and that I had the chance to play with him a little bit more. If they would have just picked up where they left off, I feel like I would have instantly connected with the characters once more, because it's been a while since I've seen them. And I just feel like we needed more young, hormonal, annoying teenage Ellie. I wanted to see her whole journey through puberty. I really wanted to see how she grew up and I feel like I missed a lot of her story. I'm gonna make a point about this in the ending of the video, so stay tuned for that. Something that I was wondering when I was playing this game is that if I would be writing a story about two opposing characters that you're supposed to both love and root for, then I would have gone about this completely different. I feel that if they wanted to drive up the tension and also have the message of violence is a cycle and it will never, heal anyone, I think they would have been able to accomplish that with the somewhat cliched storyline that I'm going to try to convey to you. What I would have done is, with my idea of the DLCs, build up our understanding of Abby a little bit more, building up our understanding of the world even. We have a connection with Abby and we have a connection with Ellie, and I really wanted them to meet but not be aware of each other or know who the other was. Let's say that Joel indeed died at the moment he did, and when Ellie arrives, she arrives too late, meaning that Joel is already dead, so no one knows what Ellie looks like, because that was a plot point that could have been interesting had Joel remained unknown to this group for a little while longer. And she also doesn't know what Abby looks like. Would have been nice had Joel told Ellie to never reveal her true identity either. I had this idea in my head that Ellie and Abby would be fighting together with the dog there, because I just feel that the dogs were underused. They were used to emotionally manipulate me into liking Abby. Didn't work. I just wanted to have a doggy help my main characters, okay? Is that so much to ask? To then discover that Ellie is who she is. They really did not know each other at all, so it was kind of easy for them to want to kill each other. It is a little bit cliched what I just said, but I do believe that I would have enjoyed that experience more than the one that I got. This is actually my closing thoughts to this video. I just wanted to say that, linking to all of the things I said before, the 3 words that I uttered when I played the game quite early on already, and these are words that you do not want to hear when you're playing a game, is what a waste. They could have picked up where they left off. They could have had more DLCs. They could have dipped their toes into like semi-open world gameplay before this story came out, because what do we have now? We have a completely broken Ellie, a protagonist that we all loved. We have a dead Joel. We have Dina and the baby that are gone. Jesse, poor Jesse, he was never important in the first place. And Tommy was also really not Tommy. I'm not sure which character that was, but that was not Tommy and that was not Maria. All of the characters that I loved were basically massacred in this one installment of the franchise. And although I do get that a second installment of this game had high expectations, this is the kicker. I feel that by taking the decisions that they did, they burned so many bridges. The most interesting bits of the story were only shown in cutscenes. We had maybe 1 or 2 real gameplay moments that we actually could take control of Joel or Ellie. I wanted more teenage Ellie, but I already know what's going to happen with adult Ellie, and now anything that won't fit that narrative, they will never make. Once a sequel is made, or once a next part of the story is told, it's very difficult to erase that. It's impossible to try to erase the previous one. It's the same that happened with the new Star Wars movies. It's the same that happened with the Game of Thrones last season. It's there now. It's made. It's forever. And I'd rather people spend more time developing something, thinking about something, trying shit out in smaller installments before they make huge games that basically ruin everything you built up in the first place. These are just some of the questions that I was asking myself. Had I been on the writing team, I would have gone about it completely different. These should have been 2 completely separate stories. They should have, tried more shit out before aging up my beautiful, beautiful Ellie, and before burning the bridges that I hoped they would have built instead. Also, quickly, a point that I wanted to make. I already cleaned up my whole setup, so I'm just gonna do it like this. I know that there's talk about a show coming from The Last of Us, so that should, give us some more story, hopefully about Ellie and Joel. But the reason why this game was so acclaimed is because it was arguably one of the best narrative storytelling games out there. I'm sure that this story could have worked in a series as well, but I just feel that it was such a beautiful game that I would think it's a shame that they're now gonna make a show out of it. It being a game was one of its strengths, so I wish they would just continue putting all of their attention on the games. So thank you for listening to this awful ramble. I hope this video wasn't as disappointing as the game, and I hope you will be here for other videos of mine. Leave a comment and then we can have a discussion below this video, because I would like to know what you guys thought of my ideas. Thank you for watching, and I will hopefully see you next time. Bye!